There's a lot of excited librarians out there. Oh, we're started. So good afternoon, folks. We're going to start the webinar in just a few minutes. We're letting the waiting room and the attendees join us, so we'll get started in just about 2 minutes. Good afternoon. We're going to get started in just about a minute, waiting for a few more folks to join us, and the program will start shortly. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm very excited to have that you are with us this afternoon. I think you're going to really enjoy this program. We're going to have a conversation with Ramsey from the Library of Congress, and I just think you're going to find his talk very interesting. Before we get started, I want to make it also add that our program today is being brought to us by the Z. Smith Reynolds Library's Board of Visitors, so we thank them very much for making this program possible. And that I also wanted to just talk a little bit about why we're so excited to have a program with a Lick alum who's working with the Library of Congress. So Library of Congress gets librarians really excited. You know, besides being the biggest library in the world, it's actually, you may not realize it, you know, everyone knows it's this great library that's up in Washington, D.C., but it impacts the work of us here at the Z. Smith Reynolds Library every day. And if you use the library, you're using a lot of things that the Library of Congress has helped us make possible. And so I thought I was going through a list of a few things just to sort of set the context for today, how they affect our everyday life. But if you've ever used our catalog and actually found something, they set the cataloging standards. We use Library of Congress subject headings. And then once you've found that entry in our catalog, if you've ever gone into our stacks to find a book, same thing. We use the Library of Congress call number system, so that's how we find things. And then if you use our digital collections, we use the scanning standards and the search standards for our digital materials that was developed by the Library of Congress. And then another thing that hits our everyday life, if you do any kind of research or writing and you're trying to figure out how much you can cite, or you know, is this something I can put on course reserves? We look to the guidance from the U.S. Copyright Office, also at the Library of Congress. So very impactful on us at ZSR, but also for everyone who uses libraries. So not just being this one great collection and destination spot. So before we get started, I will give a few housekeeping features. We're going to be using the Q&A feature on Zoom today. So if you have questions, feel free to populate that at the end of the talk. I'll be acting as moderator and making sure that our speakers get the questions. And also, just to let you know, this is being recorded, and we will share that later. And now I'm really delighted to introduce Barry Glendenning. Barry is a member of our Board of Visitors and is a Wake Forest alum, and he has graduate degrees from the University of Nebraska and also the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He was a Fulbright Scholar and studied at University College London, and also served in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. He worked as a civil servant at the Office of Management and Budget, which is part of the Executive Office of the President, and worked for 5 presidents. Since 2009, he's been an adjunct and affiliate faculty member at George Mason University in their School of Policy and Government. So we're very happy to have Barry here to introduce Ryan and Rebecca. So Barry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our special guests, Ryan Ramsey and Rebecca Walker. From the fall 2020 Wake Forest magazine, Carol Hanner's article entitled National Treasures offers the reader a valuable perspective on the Library of Congress's never-ending supply of fascinating items, from photography to film to the largest collection of comic books and baseball cards. For those who have used the main reading room in the British Museum, the main reading room in the Library of Congress offers a similar inspiring and encouraging experience for research, thought, and knowledge expansion. Our speaker this afternoon, Ryan Ramsey, is a member of the Wake Forest class of 2003. At Wake Forest, Ryan served as the Speaker of the House and the Student Government President. Ryan completed a double major in history and political science, and like many of us present this afternoon, Ryan's favorite place at Wake Forest happened to be Z. Smith Reynolds Library. Before coming to the Library of Congress in 2017 as the Chief of Staff, Ryan experienced a varied career with increasing responsibilities, including working on a national campaign for a presidential candidate, later for Senator Majority Leader Reid, and for President Obama in various roles, including presidential personnel, and subsequently at the Department of Homeland Security. To interview Ryan this afternoon, we welcome Rebecca Walker. Rebecca is the president of the Zsr Ambassadors. The Zsr Ambassadors represent a student leadership opportunity that hosts and recommends ways to improve the library experience. As a member of the Wake Forest University class of 2021, Rebecca is majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology and is minoring in anthropology. Thank you, Rebecca, for serving in this important leadership role at Wake Forest, and congratulations on your upcoming graduation next month. And look forward to your conversation now with Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, for that introduction. So Ryan, many Wake students are interested in careers in government and in Washington, D.C. Could you describe the path to your current job?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Dean Pyatt, for having me today. I'm honored to be with you, at least over the screen here, and talk a little bit about the Library of Congress and the fun work that we're doing there. As Barry alluded to, I'm the Chief of Staff at the Library of Congress. I've been there for about 4 years. Before being at the Library of Congress, I was in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs when in 2016, February of 2016, President Obama nominated Carla Hayden to be the 14th Librarian of Congress. And I was tasked with helping shepherd her nomination through the Senate confirmation process. And so I got to know her very well through that, and was excited when she asked me to come work at the library after the administration ended in 2017. I found myself in the White House in 2011 after working for Senator Reid from Nevada for about 4 years, including through his 2010 reelection. That was a very exciting time and a very exciting job as well. So I've been blessed to have some really fun career opportunities. The thing I think is worth pointing out, and I do this because I think it makes me proud, it should make Wake Forest proud, is the first 2 jobs I had out of college in politics, campaign politics. I was connected to both of them by Wake Forest classmates, folks I graduated with in 2003, who invited me out to Iowa to work on the Iowa caucuses in Waterloo, Iowa, and then at the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee back here on Capitol Hill a year later. So that is the route that I took. It makes a little bit of sense in hindsight, but I never quite had a linear plan, maybe 5 or 10 years out as a young graduate.
That's really awesome. And I think Wake puts a lot of emphasis on building those connections. So I'm glad that was part of your journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the Library of Congress does and what are some of the current initiatives?
Oh, sure. That's a big question. I'll ask you to bear with me on a long answer. And you're looking at a couple of the exterior photos of the library right now that give you a sense of where we're located. Immediately next door to the library is the U.S. Supreme Court, and right across the street, the vantage point from which you're looking right now is the U.S. Capitol East Front. So the Library of Congress is the world's largest library. We have over 172 million items in the collection. We add about 10,000 items to that collection each day. We opened in 1897 in the Thomas Jefferson building that you're looking at there. And there's a beautiful image from the east steps of the Capitol. The Library of Congress dates back to 1802. We have had 14 librarians. As Barry said in his introduction, Carla Hayden is the 14th librarian. I think what we left out is that she's the first woman to hold that position and the first person of color to hold that position. So certainly something that the library can be proud of. As the world's largest library, we're also the oldest federal cultural institution, although not without some drama along the way. About 10 years after we were created, the British stormed Washington, burned the Capitol building using the Library of Congress, which was at the time a small room, probably not much bigger than your living room, as the start of the fire starter, essentially, that burned the Capitol. Let's see, 1 year later, I think it was, Congress acquired Thomas Jefferson's library, which was considered world-class at the time, about 6,500 volumes for about $24,000 to reconstitute the Library of Congress. The funny story there is that Jefferson was, this was after his presidency, and he was trying to finish up his construction at Monticello and had run into some money problems and had the option of either selling his world-class wine collection or his world-class book collection. He sold the books and kept the wine. So fast forward about 50 years, Congress began requiring through the copyright law anyone registering a copyright to make a copy available of that work at the Library of Congress. And so that really began to grow the collections. Some of the main parts of the Library of Congress were and still are the Congressional Research Service, which started about 110 years ago, the U.S. Copyright Office, and then the sort of traditional library part of the Library of Congress. And we'll get into some of the fun things around what's in those collections in a moment. Service to Congress is the central part of the Library of Congress's mission. Service to researchers. So a lot of the folks affiliated with Wake Forest and other cultural or academic institutions have done work at the Library of Congress. But what I really want to highlight is that the Library of Congress is available and open to everyone. Anybody over the age of 16 can get a reader's card, a library card at the Library of Congress, and go in and conduct research on any topic that's interesting to you. My dad and I did some genealogy research a couple of years ago. And so I would encourage you, in addition to visiting when the pandemic has passed and we're reopened to the public, and enjoying the beautiful building that you're looking at images of here, also know that it's there for you and that you can use it. So with that, let's take a tour inside the building. If we can click ahead a slide or two. So here's another image. There's an aerial photo from the Capitol Rotunda. And this is our rotunda. That's the one from the Capitol Rotunda looking at our campus. So you'll see there the Jefferson building. Behind it is the Adams building, and to the south of it, or to the right, is the Madison building. Those are the three Capitol Hill Library of Congress buildings. So the next photo shows you the main reading room, which is sort of the sanctuary of the Library of Congress. It's a wonderful, quiet, and sort of it's just a very special place, for lack of a better word here. What you are looking at here is the view that you'd see as a visitor from the overlook down onto the reading room floor. That red band that you see sort of across the horizontal red band across the middle tracks several interesting portrait statues that each column there represents a different different field of study. So art, commerce, history, law, philosophy, poetry, religion, science. And then on either side of each of those, you can hopefully make out a little, what's actually larger than me, but in the photo, it's a little sort of pewter colored or gray colored statue representing people who are historically significant in those fields. So for art, we have Beethoven and Michelangelo. Commerce is Columbus and Fulton. Plato and Bacon for philosophy, Homer and Shakespeare for poetry, Moses and the Apostle Paul for religion, Newton and Henry, who was the first secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, for science. What you might have noticed there was that they are all men. One of the things that is interesting about the Library of Congress is, and I have yet to be corrected on this, so maybe somebody out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are no, aside from the engraving of Dr. Hayden's name on the wall below her 13 predecessors, there are no depictions or recognitions of actual human women in the Library of Congress up until now. So all of the historical figures that we've recognized to date have been men. So I hope that's something that will change in the remaining 5 years of her term. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is what I think is also interesting about this room. This is the view that you cannot get from that overlook as a casual visitor, but that you can only get from the main reading room floor. This is a portrait by Edwin Blashfield, called Human Understanding. And if you can make out the sort of bluish image in the middle, the veil of ignorance is being lifted from a woman's face. And I think it's significant that you can only see this from the floor of the reading room, which is where you'd be conducting research, where you'd be lifting your own veils of ignorance and learning something new on the topic that you're researching. In the band around that, the circular band around that, there are 12 different civilizations that were in 1897 perceived to have all led to American civilization. And it notes in each of those the contributions those civilizations made. So you have Egypt representing written record, Judea with religion, Greece and philosophy, Rome and administration, Islam and physics, the Middle Ages representing modern languages, Italy and the fine arts, Germany and printing, and we'll get back to Germany and printing in a moment, Spain and discovery, England and literature, France and emancipation, and then America representing science, with a sort of Rodin-like thinker that looks an awful lot like Abraham Lincoln. So I am not an art history expert, but this has been a really fun thing for me to learn about at the library. And I as we go into the next image, which is of the Great Hall, which is my favorite space in the library, and one that is very much open to the public, general public. You'll see that there are a number of other interesting symbols and representations here, beginning with the compass rose in yellow on the floor, surrounded by the astrological signs. If you were to go straight ahead on the ground floor through that archway, you would be in the main reading room. If you were just above it on the mezzanine level, you can just barely make out the mosaic of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. Going to the next slide, you'll see a closer image of some of the ceilings along there that are just too rich in meaning and symbolism and art to go through each one. But I thought I would share that image with you in case you haven't seen it yourselves. So now that we've sort of described the box, what's inside the box, what's in the collection. So the Library of Congress has, among those 172 million items, we have collected in nearly 500 languages. More than half of our collection is in a language other than English. We have a prints and photographs collection that has about 14 million photographs. I believe that's among the largest in the world. It contains some really well-known photographers' collections, Diane Arbus, Dorothea Lange, and many others. Our geography and maps collection includes the Volsa-Mueller map, which is often called America's birth certificate because it's the first map to include the word America on it. We have the Buell map, which is I think from 1783, and is one of the early accurate depictions of the colonies of the early country. Let's see, we have a manuscripts division that contains the papers of the first 23 presidents up through Calvin Coolidge. We have, as I alluded to earlier, as I sort of put a hint out there with Germany and printing, we have the one of 3 perfect editions of the Gutenberg Bible, which is printed on vellum. So that is one of our most prized possessions, I would say. We have more than 5 million film and sound recordings, mostly stored down at our campus in Culpeper, Virginia. One of the fascinating things that I learned visiting there was that a medium for recording sound shortly after I guess in the later 19th century was a wax cylinder, which is, if you can sort of imagine a record album being molded into the shape of like a can. That was used to capture some audio recordings in that era, including Native American languages and on. We have a music division with a collection that includes enormous volumes of sheet music. It includes a musical instrument collection, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And as Barry said, the world's largest collection of baseball cards and comic books, about 140,000 comic books. And then one other thing that people might not know is that we also, part of the Library of Congress is the National Library Services for the Blind and Print Disabled. So we maintain and make available to the blind and otherwise print disabled enormous volumes of talking ebooks and other resources like that make the library's collection available to a broader audience. And all of that leads to our major initiative that Rebecca asked about. And I think that the Library of Congress is a national treasure. It is something that I hope everybody would take advantage of, but we haven't, I think, adequately enough invited people to do that. And so Dr. Hayden and the US Congress have undertaken a public-private partnership where we're getting some money from Congress and a good amount of money from private donors to really expand what people experience when they visit the library, either virtually or even more impactfly when they visit on site. So there are 3 key elements of that include a exhibits gallery highlighting a rotating collection of our treasures. So that might have some fun interplay between things like the Gutenberg Bible and Jonathan Larson's sort of handwritten calculations for seasons of love from the play Rent, where he figures out how many hours are in a year. These are a few of my favorite things where you get to see all of the things that he listed out and scratched out and came up with the final version of that. Maybe next to the original Superman comic or something like that. So there are a lot of fun ways to think about the historical sort of classic treasures and the more modern ones, maybe in conversation with each other. And so that's something that that we invite the public to take part in, either as it's being developed or certainly once it opens beginning 2022, 23, and 24. The Treasures Gallery and Orientation Gallery, which will be right beneath the main reading room floor, where we will allow people to, through an oculus or a skylight in the floor, where you might have noticed there is a kind of reference desk that's not really in any sort of operational use right now. We'll have a skylight that will allow people to see, without disturbing any of the research happening on the reading room floor, straight up into that rotunda, in hopes of sort of democratizing access to knowledge and lifting that veil of ignorance. And the third, I think, exciting element of that visitor experience plan is a youth center, a family center that will allow people of all ages to get something out of the Library of Congress, to put their hands on history and either with facsimiles or with other things that folks can't really hurt, learn more about the library and its collections, and hopefully pique their interest in learning more about something that we can help them with. So I'll pause there. I know I talked for a long time. I warned you that it was going to be a long answer, but there's no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to what the Library of Congress is, does, has, and how people can use it.
Could you talk more about what a chief of staff for the Library of Congress does?
Sure. So I've mentioned a couple of times that the Library of Congress, which is, I talked about the collection, but what I haven't talked about yet is the staff. There are about 3,300 people who work at the Library of Congress. They're led by the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. And they are, she would tell you, and I will echo, that they are our biggest treasure. The knowledge that these folks have accumulated and can share with researchers and with the public is astounding, and it's really a source of pride for all of us. So it is a lot of fun to work with all of them to get the entire enterprise moving in the same direction. So as Dr. Hayden has set her vision for what the library will do during her 10-year tenure, it's my responsibility to sort of coordinate all of those elements and keep things moving forward and together. So most directly, the most direct answer to your question is I work closely with I oversee the Congressional Relations Office. I work closely with members of Congress on their interest in the library. I get to do fun things like prepare Dr. Hayden for her congressional hearings. We'll have one here in a couple of weeks. So that was the invasive exercise that she had to prepare herself for 5 years ago or so as a nominee, and she's gotten quite good at it since. So there's a lot of congressional work in my role. There's a lot of development and fundraising work in my role. I work to coordinate the Center for Exhibits and Interpretation, which does a lot of our exhibit galleries, and also with the Center for Learning, Literacy, and Engagement, which does a lot of the programming that helps people further explore and interpret the library's holdings. So examples of programming might be things like book talks or concerts, and we'll talk much more about that, I'm sure, because those are some of the most fun ways for people to access the library.
It's very interesting. Could you talk more about how the Library of Congress is appointed by the president, and it is a nonpartisan institution? How does Congress interact with the library in that capacity? Sure.
I think the most important part, and one of the things I've enjoyed most, despite the background I described earlier, is that the library is a fiercely nonpartisan place. As I said, our primary user is Congress, and Congress is partisan. But when they're at the library, I think you'd all be proud to see how they set all of that stuff aside. So in some tangible examples, the Congressional Research Service is the authoritative, nonpartisan research tank. They're not a think tank, but they're a research arm of Congress. They view themselves very much as an extension of congressional staff. So, for example, if a member of Congress wanted to know what is in the proposed infrastructure bill, or what was in the farm bill, how would it impact this type of farmer, or this population in my home state, the CRS would conduct that public policy research to help answer those questions. In the last year, they fielded about 75,000 questions from Congress. And so that is, I think, the most direct way in which we benefit Congress. The law library similarly has cataloged our legal system since our founding, and many other legal systems around the world, and is a real resource for members of Congress in that way. One of the more enjoyable things that we do that we weren't able to do last year, I guess it was this year, January of this year, is the new member seminar. So when new members of Congress are elected, they typically go through a 3-day offsite seminar conducted by the library and the Congressional Research Service, where we, many of them are public policy experts already, but maybe not in every single field. We help brief them up on any matters of public policy that are either topical right now, likely to come up in this session of Congress, or are of interest to them. So that might include things like uh, the opioid crisis or the pandemic, or the Middle Eastern foreign policy, or any other topics like that that you can consider. It is also a real social bonding time, and I think that's a key part of what the library does unofficially for Congress. I think I have noticed, even in my time, dating back 18 or so years in Washington, that members of Congress have to spend more and more and more time raising money to be reelected. And that is, we could argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just a thing. It's just the way things are. And what the impact that I think I've noticed is that they've spent less time socializing with each other. And when you socialize and have a decent relationship with somebody, you're less likely to attack them publicly, even if it's just for show. And so the library for the last 6 years, I believe, has held these congressional dialogue dinners once a month, sometimes twice a month, with a major historian or other author or public figure. An example of that latter would be somebody like Bill Gates, coming to talk about a major topic. And it could be a historical topic that person has written a book on, or it could be global public health, entrepreneurialism in the Gates example. And one of the things that I think you all would be happy and even proud to see are these folks who you see on cable news every day, doing battle with each other, choosing to sit down next to each other. It's totally off the record. It's invitation only. And I hope that can have some impact on lowering the temperature in our public discourse right now. So that is, I think, one of the things that the library, a couple examples of the things that the library does to try to provide a space for members of Congress to certainly learn about matters of public policy, but also to socialize and improve their relationship with each other.
Yeah, I definitely am really proud to hear that there's some nonpartisan dialogue that the library helps facilitate. Can you tell us more about some of the amazing items at the library, and what are some of the unexpected things that you would find there?
Oh, there's a ton of unexpected stuff. Let's see, we have an image, I think, next that was also featured in the magazine article. This is the photos of the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets the night he was assassinated. You'll notice at the top, that's a folding pair of eyeglasses. I think that's the eyeglasses case to the right of it, a little wallet there. Underneath the wallet's a Confederate $5 bill, which is very interesting. And it's not fully known why he had that. It's suspected that it was just from a recent visit to Southern Virginia, but something that he held on to. A pocket knife, that weird thing that sort of looks like a makeup compact, is a eyeglasses cleaner, like you would wipe off your glasses with that. To the right of that, I believe, is a key fob. You can see the handkerchief. I think what we're missing, unless my screen's cut off, and it's probably not in this image to begin with, are the newspaper clippings that he carried with him. Which I think I said in the story, I just find fascinating and sad. They were positive and negative. Some were not new, but he literally carried with him the opinions of, the favorable and unfavorable opinions of people. And so that was something interesting. Some lighter stuff. We also have, I think in the next slide, you'll see a picture of Carl. Oh, here's another fun one. This is Frederick Douglass, a speech that he had written and delivered, sort of eulogizing Abraham Lincoln and describing how he thought African Americans would remember President Lincoln favorably. The next image, I think, is the one of Carl Sagan. This one's fun. He's young at this point, maybe a middle schooler, and he's imagining what space travel might look like. And the fun part about this one for me, in addition to just imagining a genius as a kid, is that Seth MacFarlane, the guy who created Family Guy and some other notable TV shows, acquired this collection and donated it to the library. So that's, I think, demonstrative of how some of our collections come. Some things we buy, some things are given to us, and some things are acquired on our behalf and then given. Howard Buffett acquired Rosa Parks's papers a couple of years ago and gave them to the library, for example. I think the next page is Henry Aaron's scouting report. Nope, here's some prints and photographs, some of my other favorite collections. Jack Johnson, the early 20th century boxer, who, by the way, if you haven't seen the Ken Burns documentary called Unforgivable Blackness about Jack Johnson, I would recommend that. So he's somebody I've read a bit about and enjoyed learning more about. And then that's Jesse Owens on the right. The next one I think is here's Henry Aaron. So Hank Aaron came to the library for a private talk with our Madison Council, which is one of our philanthropic groups, in 2019 it was. And we were able to show him Branch Rickey's scouting report of him, which he had never seen before. Branch Rickey, for those who don't know, is a baseball executive who's credited with integrating baseball by giving Jackie Robinson his shot in the big leagues. And was that 1947, I think. So anyway, you can read the scouting report here, but the funny thing here, in addition, Hank Aaron was Hall of Famer, home run king for a long time, but he's a guest hitter. And Hank Aaron kind of laughed and said, yeah, I guess I was. So that was a fun sort of pinch me moment at the library. After that, I think this is the image that this is another sad one. So this is Teddy Roosevelt, 1884, which would have made him like in his mid 20s and about 15 or so years before he was president. It's February 14th, so it's Valentine's Day, and the light has gone out of my life. There's a big X, because it's the day that his mother and his wife had both died in the same house the same day. So it was just a horribly depressing low for him, of course, but it's remarkable to think about where he, what the next decade or so looked like in his own journey and discovery, which is a fascinating period that Candace Millard has written about a bit. But after that, to grow from that and become, the president and not just a president, but a historically significant one, I thought was interesting. Next, I think, let's see what the next one. There we go. This is sorry for the bad image here, but I took this on my cell phone at the spur of the moment. I was giving a tour to the novelist Dan Brown, who most of you will know from the Da Vinci Code. He popped up in the library because I think this is still happening, and maybe it's happened, I missed it, but I think ABC bought the rights to his book called The Lost Symbol, I think it was, which largely takes place at the library. And so we were showing him Jefferson's collection, which is available and it's publicly displayed. And he just sort of poked around and of course, of the 6,000 volumes, he finds the one volume that's called Symbiology. And so if folks have read Dan Brown, they know that that's like his thing. Like it's all it's all symbols and conspiracy and so forth. So this was a funny thing for him to pick out. And that was another fun pinch me moment in my job. Other unexpected things, let's see. This is just an image, a map or a drawing of my hometown of Kokomo, Indiana. You can see the Wildcat River sort of streaking through central Indiana's plains. I think the things we don't have images for, but I wanted to highlight, President Macron from France visited 2018, I think it was, maybe 2019. And the thing that he loved the most was that we pulled out an old Parisian telephone book. Of course, we have the world's largest collection of historic telephone books, and had it turned to the page that showed his childhood home and his parents' names listed there. And I think he just thought it was funny to see that, an American library would have something so personal to him. Unexpected things that sort of divide opinion about whether they're cool or weird include locks of Beethoven's hair and Jefferson's hair. We have the world's largest collection of a single instrument, the flute, including James Madison's flute, a flute made from glass, a flute made from jade, which is slightly radioactive because where it was mined, but not dangerous. And then we have a significant collection of stringed instruments, including 6 Stradivarius instruments, 2 violas, 3 violins, and a cello, which are played regularly So if you attend a musical performance at the Library of Congress, which are themselves quite varied and fun, so we might have anything from Tank and the Bangas to chamber music or symphony or string quartet. The latter types will often use those strads to keep them fresh. It's part of the gift instrument in a different way. The gift agreement that these instruments have to be played regularly to stay in shape. So that is my list, totally incomplete list of fun and unexpected things at the library, and I would love to have you all explore further if you want to. You can find a lot of this stuff, and this has been a major initiative. You can find a lot of this stuff online at loc.gov. So I mentioned that we have the papers of the first 23 presidents. Those are entirely online now, entirely digitized. A question that we often get is how much of the library's collection is available digitally. It's a difficult thing to answer because we have a lot of books that are still covered under copyright, and we're not going to, we're very unlikely to make a digital copy of Huck Finn available because that's so accessible in so many other ways. But that image that you just saw of Teddy Roosevelt's diary is available nowhere else. That is the libraries, and that's the sole copy of it. So those are the sorts of things that we focus on digitizing and making available publicly.
So the Library of Congress is also more than just a repository of knowledge. What are some events, festivals, and prizes that you sponsor?
Yes, this is a fun one. So the big annual event is the National Book Festival. That takes place every, it's August or September every year, and it's Washington, D.C.'s largest single day annual event. It typically brings about 250,000 people to a free day-long book festival that has something like 100 to 125 authors talking about their books, interviewed about their writing. That covers all styles and genres, from children's literature to young adult fiction to science and technical writing to history to biography. So the way that we've tried over the past 2 years to extend that rather than just have it as one day is, in addition to that, we also have a weekly National Book Festivals Presents series. So these were initially in-person events at the library, but shortly after we launched them, the pandemic hit. So those were quickly shifted to be virtual events. The 20th annual National Book Festival took place virtually last fall, and the 21st annual will take place virtually this fall, and hopefully by 2022, I fully expect that we'll be able to be back in person with something that will resemble things we've done in the past. In addition to those book festival and book celebration events, we also host an annual Gershwin concert. The library for the last 10 or 15 years has awarded the George and Ira Gershwin Award for popular song. George and Ira Gershwin, for folks who don't know, were a jazz era songwriting duo, brothers, and we celebrate their legacy in part because we have not only their piano, but their whole collection archive at the Library of Congress. We celebrate them by recognizing other major songwriters in popular song. So let's see, that includes most recently Garth Brooks, let's see, Smokey Robinson was on that list, Gloria Estefan and her husband Emilio, who's a significant producer, music producer, Willie Nelson, Billy Joel, Paul McCartney, Carole King, I believe, was on that list. Paul Simon, I think, received the first prize. That concert happens once a year. In fact, it happened in, I think it was March the 4th of 2020, so about a week before everything shut down. We also created the National Film Registry about 10 or 20 years ago to recognize historically significant films that are either in need of preservation or that are culturally significant in the American story. So that might include anything from one of the first things ever captured on film, which was Edison sneezing, to some 19th century boxing matches up through more modern films like The Big Lebowski or something like that. The sound registry similarly captures recorded sound. Sometimes it's mid-century radio broadcasts or things like that. More recently, in addition to things like that, we've also captured popular song to include artists like Jay-Z. This year we honored Janet Jackson for Rhythm Nation and also had Kermit the Frog. So a real variety there. The Librarian of Congress also names the United States Poet Laureate. So that list is long and distinguished to include Robert Penn Warren, William Carlos Williams, Robert Frost. More recently, Tracy K. Smith, who's a terrific poet, and Joy Harjo, who is our first Native American Poet Laureate and the current Poet Laureate. I would add that Amanda Gorman, who I think captured a lot of our attention at the inauguration with her poetry reading, and who we are over the moon about, was discovered at the Library of Congress by Dr. Biden when she was still, I don't remember, I might be wrong about that. She might not have still been second lady. She might have been out of the White House, but she heard her read at the library, and that's how Amanda came to read at the inauguration. So let's see, we've covered film, sound, Gershwin, book festival, the Poet Laureate. We have an ambassador for young people's literature. So this is another way that we try to connect the library with a broader audience. The most recent two ambassadors have been Jacqueline Smith, who's best known for her book, and which my daughter and I are reading right now, which won the National Book Award, called Brown Girl Dreaming, which I recommend to all of you, whether you're a young person or not. And then Jason Reynolds, who's just like phenomenal from the DC area. And I think one of my favorite quotes, he's a prolific writer of young people's literature. One of my favorite quotes that he tries to explore mostly with young men of color, but young men everywhere and their parents, is girls are sort of taught that they're not allowed to be anything, and boys are taught that they're not allowed to feel anything. And so that's sort of a cool, and he's this great, big, tall, strong guy, long dreadlocks, super sensitive. And he's a really cool ambassador for the library. I'm almost done. The last prize that I'll focus on is the prize for fiction. So it's not unlike a National Book Award or something like that. Most recently, we've recognized Colson Whitehead, who wrote The Underground Railroad, among many other books. Annie Proulx, who wrote The Shipping News, among a lot of other stuff. Dennis Johnson, who I read a lot of when I was at Wake. Louise Erdrich, who writes extensively on the modern Native American experience. Don DeLillo, Toni Morrison, Isabel Allende, and John Grisham years and years ago was one of the early winners. So we have a lot of that sort of programming and awards that we offer. And all of those people, when they are given that award, tend to do public programming at the library that is open to anybody. So those are examples of the sorts of things that folks can experience if they take advantage of the library's programming.
So I have one more question for you. You have worked for two trailblazing leaders, President Obama, the first African-American to be president, and Dr. Carla Hayden, the first woman and African-American to be Librarian of Congress. How does this influence you and your work?
I think that's kind of the whole point. I mean, I think it's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to help folks who are doing something new and who are trying to lift up people, whether it's people of color, whether it's women who haven't, I think, gotten their due in American history. It's why I wasn't trying to be a downer earlier when I highlighted that the library doesn't have any depictions of American women or women anywhere else in history in the library, except for the name of the 14th librarian carved into the wall. I think there's a lot of work to do there, and I think it's we can all play a part in that. And I'm honored that she asked me to help, and I'm hopeful that I can have some impact in moving along what should be a considerable legacy that's noticeable. I think for the general public, people who didn't know that they were allowed or invited to use the Library of Congress, who now feel a little bit more included.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you. This was a fascinating talk. We do have some question and answer or questions that have been in, so I'll add that question. And if anybody else has questions, please use the Q&A button to ask questions. So the first one is on, you mentioned you would like to see more women honored in the Library of Congress, and then having the first female librarian may help us. Can you shed any lights on plans for this, and any significant figures you would like to see included? So this sort of fits into the same, sort of the as you ended.
Well, the good news is I'm not coming up with that list. What I would probably do is I would look for public input on who folks think would be American women who have made significant contributions, and I think Dr. Hayden, I would look for her own considerable expertise and women who she thinks could be highlighted as well. I would love to see that if you remember that red band around the reading room, that is not full. There are spaces to add statues. So I think there and elsewhere we could certainly do more to highlight the work of Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. We have an exhibit right now on the 19th Amendment and the suffrage movement. There are any number of suffragettes who could claim a space in the library. So that is a short but certainly not even long enough list to begin with.
Let's see. We have another question. Can you talk about where all these things are stored? Is everything in Capitol Hill, or is it things stored elsewhere in the DC area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just about as soon as we build each new building, we outgrow it. And we sometimes get these questions from Congress, when are you going to stop asking us for more money to build shelves or to acquire digital storage? And the answer is probably never, because we're probably never going to stop acquiring things unless you want us to get rid of some things that we have. Then we're not going to be able to free up space. That's not really the way I think libraries work. The library has enough shelving to stretch from here to, I believe it's Dubuque, Iowa. So it's about 1,000 miles of shelving. Some of that material, although not very much, is in the Jefferson building. More of it's in the Madison building and the Adams building, but a large amount of it is stored in several offsite storage facilities, including at Fort Meade. There are currently 6 large storage modules that are temperature controlled, climate controlled, humidity controlled, and so forth. And those are available to researchers on pretty quick turnaround. So if you were coming next Monday and you emailed or chatted with the library ahead of time and said, I'd like to request these, 73 items or books or newspapers, I'm coming on Monday, they could probably get them there in time. We have storage at Iron Mountain. We have digital storage in at least 4 different venues across the DC and Virginia area. As I noted, we have the Culpeper facility in Central Virginia or Southern Virginia that has most notably storage for their nitrate vaults. So film used to be highly combustible. Basically, they would run it in a theater and they would throw away the film. That was the way it was intended to. It was not intended to have a long shelf life. So a lot of films are orphan works or have been lost entirely. We have been able to preserve a number of those in these refrigerator like concrete structures that these films are highly combustible and can self-combust. So we essentially compartmentalized all of it so that if something does catch fire, it destroys nothing more than itself or maybe its neighbor. So there's just a fascinating variety and amount between digital storage, film storage, prints and photograph archiving, and then the actual, volume after volume of books. There are stacks throughout, sort of emanating as spokes on a wheel from that main reading room, both underneath it and all up just about into the roof.
All right, we got quite a few more questions in there, so I'll sort of try to combine any.
I'll try to be quicker then.
Here's one. As a comic book collector, I've seen Library of Congress copies out in the field. Can you estimate, painful though it may be, how much the library has lost through theft of such collectibles before security was tightened?
Oh, I can't. That's a new question for me. I know that we do loan. We have items on loan to other museums regularly. We have a office of security that maintains not only our personal security on site, but the collection security. And I think that they have sort of ramped up their efforts in recent years, but I can't estimate the value lost over the years. Sorry.
And this one's going to get into the Copyright Office ones. So I'm not sure if you're able to speak to this or not, but are folks at the Library of Congress discussing the proposed Digital Copyright Act of 2021?
I believe that's the bill that Senator Tillis is introducing. Yeah, we've worked closely with Senator Tillis. We enjoy a very good relationship with him and also with the Copyright Office. We hired a new Register of Copyrights last year, Zsr Ambassadors, and she and the library she joined as the library and the Copyright Office were in the middle of a significant modernization process. Copyright, as you probably know, has three key elements. It has registration, recordation, and then licensing. The recordation process, which is basically registering a work, is here's something I've created. Recordation is who owns it, and then licensing is who can use it for a limited purpose. The recordation process is paper-based still. So you have to literally fill something on paper, mail it in, and then so that process is being modernized with considerable investment from Congress. So we are monitoring Senator Tillis's bill and working closely with the Copyright Office and with the Senate to address the elements of that bill that I think we're already doing or that we are in agreement on, and sharing with him and his colleagues where this would have a negative impact.
So we have time for one more question. So I'm sorry, we're not going to get to everyone's questions, and I'm going to use the moderator's prerogative and choose the last one because it happens to reference my mentor, the archivist of the United States, David Ferriero. So this one asks about, how does the Library of Congress complement the National Archives in terms of acquisition and preservation of collections?
That's a good question, and a frequent question is, what is the difference between the two? What is the boundary between the two? So the National Archives tends to collect government records. The library collects a whole variety of other things that might relate to a public official, to a government official, but that are not government records. So things like their private diaries or their home, movies or photograph collection, things like that. David Ferriero and Dr. Hayden have the funniest relationship. They appear together all the time at public programs where they will do like a comedy routine trying to one-up each other on who's got the cooler stuff. Like, and the conversation always ends with the post-World War II example of a tank being sent to the Library of Congress to collect or recollect on behalf of the archives some of the documents that had been sent there for safe storage. So it's a very fun relationship, both between those two individuals, and a fun history between the two organizations.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Rebecca, for the great questions. This has been a really informative and entertaining afternoon, and I really appreciate both of your time. And I also thank you, Barry, for your introduction. And I don't think it came out there that and one of the Wake Forest connections too with Barry and Ryan is Ryan, as a senior, wanted to talk to someone who had experience on Capitol Hill, and somehow you two got connected. So you talked. So I think that's kind of
That's right.
a neat way that Wake Forest connections come together. So anyway, I want to thank you again for your remarks tonight, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. Have a great evening, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Dean Pyatt. Thanks, Rebecca. Bye all.